My one big dream is to never have to segment. AI does it for me and almost predicts when the message goes out. Dynamic content isn't new, but I think using AI to generate dynamic content so it's heavily personalized is something that we've been exploring more of.
Let's talk about your custom GPT stuff.
One of the biggest mistakes I did was I actually did like screenshots of the emails without knowing that ChatGPT doesn't really understand or read images the same way as it does text. I was like, why are all these email copies looking like really random? I see that the companies are going to be more flat as more and more people could become more generalist in their role.
Today, I'm really excited to welcome Lilian on our show, who runs Lifecycle and Better Mortgage. Personally, what I'm excited about is how in the last few months of us working together, you've shown me at least 3 hacks on how to apply AI in your day-to-day workflows. Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah, so hi Neha. Really happy to be here. I originally started in entertainment. I worked in Lifecycle for Crave, which is a streaming subscription service, so all about movies, TV. And then I moved more into finance, working at an agency for a large bank. And then Better is a fintech in the mortgage space. So I've kind of stayed in that personal finance realm. I find it a bit more rewarding, and I enjoy the fact that we're helping people get homes instead of just, getting them to their next late night binge watch.
Tell us a little bit about how your first job was like in terms of the tools you were using, how Lifecycle looked like, and what it is today with AI.
Yeah. So I remember when I first started in lifecycle marketing, a lot of the day-to-day tasks were fairly manual. I remember pulling customer segments like in Excel spreadsheets. And I'm really happy that I don't have to do that anymore. A lot of the CRM tools have quite advanced segmentation, and a lot of them are even rolling out like predictive analytics for segmentation. So I envision a world where one day in the future, I won't even have to worry about picking a segment. The AI will do that for me. And then even just building the emails, my very first email that was sent out was literally just like stacked images on top of each other. And now everything's live text, HTML. And one of the benefits of that is that you can actually test and add a lot more dynamic content with HTML. Dynamic content isn't new, but I think using AI to generate dynamic content so it's heavily personalized is something that we've been like exploring more of at Better as well. The velocity of getting campaigns out, the personalization has really hit a new level in the last couple of years.
I love that. And the theme I'm catching from that is just how everything went dynamic from like manual Excel sheets, manual emails to dynamic segments, dynamic emails. And I guess what you were alluding to is in the future, it's not just dynamic, but everything is proactive and recommended by AI.
Yeah. So I've even seen like some retail emails where they show the products in the email of the exact ones that you were shopping in. I think that kind of personalization is just exactly what's needed, instead of just like, hey, go back to your cart. So I think for my role, we're looking at how to get someone back into their mortgage application journey. A lot of the big driver there is rates. So like using examples and actual customer rates, I think really makes the customer feel like they're reading an email just for them instead of a one-off campaign.
I was always curious, actually, especially before we started working together, on how do you think about a regulated industry like, mortgage, and at the same time bring in the aspects of one-to-one personalization in real time. For example, real-time rates that you want to show to a user so it feels like it's for them, while taking care of their trust, which is core to your experiences. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of the good things about the mortgage industry is that it runs on a fairly predictable schedule. So there's like pricing every day, the Fed meetings and inflation reports that all could impact mortgage rates. So what we've done to just really be on the ball when the news drops is make these campaigns in advance with multiple iterations. So if there is a Fed meeting, what's the outcome? Is it A, B, or C? So we could get that message out in like less than 30 minutes so the customers kind of get that news update. Um, Obviously, we still have to share that with our legal team, but I think being proactive and getting some of that copy reviewed and approved beforehand has allowed us to kind of look like we're sending the message out right away.
Of that product, preparing things in advance. Now, how do you then embed AI and all the real-time personalization in your workflows when you have to prepare and schedule things in advance?
So anything from like creating copy I built my own like custom GPT with our brand guidelines, what legal is included here. So every time I need to make copy, I kind of run it through my custom GPT as like a second check, especially with all the little legal footnotes that we need to add. But then also in terms of like building emails, I knew some HTML when I first came into Lifecycle, but maybe not the full depth of a developer. I think AI has allowed me to also just toss that into GPT, being like, where is my code breaking? And kind of having um, so like a teammate to bounce ideas off of in real time. I think it's really allowed my skill set to be a little bit more broad and a little bit
Mhm.
more of a generalist within Lifecycle instead of having, a Lifecycle team with a developer, a copywriter, a Lifecycle marketer, a strategist, someone on QA. Now AI has kind of like collapsed the team, so you could be much faster and you can get an email done, get support from ChatGPT or another AI tool to help with coding, copywriting, even QA, and also just expanded some of my skill set so I don't feel limited by not knowing like how to fix something in code.
Yeah, those are three really good examples. I want to kind of dig into each one of them. So let's talk about your custom GPT stuff. Uh, Give us the insights of what did it take you to build that? So how much knowledge did you need to get started? What were some of the quirks?
Yeah. So I think at first you can upload documents into a custom GPT.
Okay.
So I uploaded our brand guidelines. I made a compliance rule book. So if you pitch this product, this is all the legal terms that you would need. And then also just fed it a bunch of examples from past emails. One of the biggest mistakes I did when doing this was I actually did like screenshots of the emails without knowing that like ChatGPT doesn't really understand or read images the same way as it does text. So it didn't, I was like, why are all these email copies looking like really random? I took all the copy in those emails, put into a plain Word doc, and then fed that into my custom GPT, and it's been a lot better since then. So it actually understands when I say include like 3 or 4 value props, it just takes the copy exactly. It almost feels like it could read it in words versus an image, which totally makes sense for an AI.
And then I love your idea of sort of extending your capacity in like making AI your code companion or engineer that helps you write HTML. How far do you think you've gone there? How much do you need to set up in advance, and where does it come and help you?
But I use it for one-off questions, so I'm not necessarily getting it to the point where I could build an entire email. At least that better because we use Iterable and we have pre-made snippets and stuff like that. A lot of the coding emails is still a siloed process versus if you can get ChatGPT to write an email from bottom to top. I haven't necessarily seen that being done. But if you were a new brand who didn't necessarily have templates or a brand structure that you had to abide by, creating a structure with ChatGPT might make it very easy. And you could almost say, like, just give me code for module 1, 2, and 3 and just stack it together, write the in between code to make it seamless. I kind of think that for newer brands, they might have the leg up because they don't have to abide by like older rules. Um, and I think what I'm interested to see is just tools for email coding use AI that's beyond just a ChatGPT or a Claude or something like that, where it's just I've seen a lot of this in marketing ads where they generate like tons of different ad variations. I definitely see HTML coding being another place that will be disrupted with AI, where it can generate emails top to bottom in code for you.
Wow.
Instead of like a dual help you code, it's just going to do it almost like prompt
And then,
away.
yeah, yeah, no, I see that future very near. What is your expectation from QA? AI or no AI, right? Like, what are the steps that you have to take manually today?
I think whoever solves this, like, definitely message me. But as I mentioned, like, the ChatGPT doesn't necessarily read images the same way as it does unformatted documents. So when I put 2 screenshots of an email and gave it, step-by-step prompts to kind of review the email, it just looked at 2 different icons. Like, one was a house and one was a checkbox, and it didn't see that they were different. And I asked it, I was like, "Oh, like, how come you don't notice one icon is a house and the other one is a checkbox?" And it was like, "Oh, we just see a simple line diagram and they both look like simple line diagrams." So of course they're the same. And it's not really bringing in like a context into it. So that's kind of where it definitely didn't really work in terms of QA, at least on the visual elements. copy. It definitely you can spot a typo, but that's kind of something where I wish it was maybe a little bit more advanced because QA does take a fair bit of time. Because there's something about a human reviewing it that's just a little bit more faster than
Right.
an AI reviewing it because it doesn't understand the context or potentially what it's looking for. So, for example, if we're only updating a template in one part, I don't necessarily need to review the rest of the code because that code hasn't changed. So I know to laser in on just the dynamic portion of the email, and then ChatGPT might, think that they have to review the entire email bottom over and over again.
Right. So that context, and then, yeah, also just the control and confidence that you can get by eyeballing it yourself. I guess switching gears a little bit, we keep hearing things like personalization, agentic AI, all these buzzwords that everybody's talking about. And, just from the examples you shared, I've seen you sort of get through that and just get your hands dirty and try these things out. What's your advice on how folks can get started on all of these things?
For personalization, I think there is a little bit of you have to set time aside to almost try something new in Lifecycle. And I've been really trying to set aside or carve some time to experiment with, some of the AI tools, even though it might be slower. But in terms of campaigns and personalization, I think setting aside some time to do one campaign with personalization to test if it works is a way that I'm looking at it in my role.
Right.
And if that works, and let's say the open rates or the conversion is really high, then spending more time and effort into it. And I think it's tough to hear all those buzzwords and from maybe senior leadership that everything has to be AI now, and then not losing sight of the day-to-day work that also keeps the business running. So it's almost like slowly introduce, experimentation, test it if it works, then putting more resources behind it. But there is a lot of hype and there's new AI tools every day. It's really easy to get lost in the day to day of everything new with AI and almost step away from your OKRs or your key objectives and results that you're meant to do in your day to day role.
Okay.
In terms of personalization, this is something that we've definitely experimented with. I think one of the biggest things is that as a mortgage company, we do have a lot of data on customers. So we are in an industry where personalization makes a lot of sense. I think if you were in a brand or a company that didn't necessarily have a lot of data on customers, I would lean onto gathering like first party data,
Well,
like for like polls or something like that, just to build up that space. When we were looking or talking to some other AI vendors and tools about like how can we personalize it, a lot of the barriers to entry was the data that you have on the customers. Large language models need a large amount of data. So if you don't have that data, some of these buzzy AI tools just won't work. So I think that's something that I've learned just kind of chatting to different vendors and tools to kind of experiment with more. And I think that's kind of where my team's looking to how can we get more data on customers? What data do we have enough volume to actually personalize at a meaningful level as well?
yeah, no, I've seen that trend as well, where you need foundations of data in place before you can do anything meaningful with it. In the old world, you had to have data and it had to be structured and it had to make sense. I think that's where AI comes in and interprets it, even if it's not the most like it's not fully fleshed and structured and in like upfront segments that you would define. Want to move to our next section, which is hot takes and predictions. So this is just your quick opinions, your bold predictions, maybe even a little bit of a controversy, and that's okay. All right, let's start with a simple one. Yeah. San Francisco or New York?
I'm gonna go New York. San Francisco is really nice. It does have the ocean, but New York just has a lovely vibe with all the bright lights, and I find it entertaining every day.
Your favorite hack with AI?
So I've started using it for recipes or grocery shopping, um, which sounds like a very simple hack, but there's a lot of energy that you take to kind of figure out here's the recipes I want to make this week. What do I need to put on a grocery list? And just tossing it into AI, you get those instantly. And I kind of love how they suggest here's some other recipes you can make with the same ingredients. So it's just made my life a little easier. It's kind of given me more free time back to think through some bigger ideas as well.
Do you go from recipe to groceries or the other way? Like you first have recipes in mind and then you figure out.
Yeah, so I've been doing recipes to groceries. because I just find some recipes on TikTok and I'm just like, oh, here it is. Help me out. What kind of groceries do I need to buy? And also just to avoid overbuying too many
Yeah.
vegetables and stuff like that.
Nice. Well, next one. AI decisioning or AI personalization.
I'm really excited about AI decisioning. I think previously, like segmentation, as I mentioned, I started doing it in Excel, and I'm not a data scientist by any means. But now with large language models, you can basically take someone who is a marketer and have them join with AI as like almost like a side data scientist
Yeah.
and do a lot of cool stuff with customer segmentation, insights, analytics, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to see where that goes. And like I mentioned, my one big dream is to never have to segment. The AI does it for me and almost predicts when the message goes out. So I'm excited to see more in that space.
I love that. The dream. And hopefully that
Yeah.
is like not very far. Um, One thing everybody's getting wrong about AI.
I think there's still a lot of fear around AI. It's still very unknown. And I think for the greater population that may have not been in, large language models space. Maybe they weren't in computer science or in degrees that were like knowing this was coming for the last 10 years. It kind of felt very sudden.
Right.
And that suddenness had made it almost scary. And I think that's kind of where we should embrace it, especially early on before compliance comes in. I also think that it will make some like big leaps and bounds in terms of like how roles are structured within a company. So I see that the companies are going to be more flat as more and more people could become more generalist in their role. I mentioned like it could help me code, it could help me copyright, stuff like that. So I see a lot of organizations becoming more flatter and more collaborative as there's no longer a need for a quite rigid hierarchical structure. So I think in the next few years, we may see more flat companies instead of the hierarchical ones that we
Right.
may have been in the previous 10 years with managers, senior managers, direct reports, stuff like that. So I think individuals may just have, become more generalists. And I think that might be a good thing as collaboration across roles has always kind of been.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I do think more people will become generalists, and they have to, and they can, right? Like they have access
Yeah.
to. Well, before we close out, I'd love to hear from you. Any last advice for our listeners? Any tips, tactics that you've been using so far?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've learned really quickly with using like just words and like the platform is just getting the tests out there faster and then iterating. Even when I was building a custom GPT, version 1 was absolutely horrendous and version 2 is a lot better, but it keeps iterating. And then as we've been testing with A/B testing in our campaigns, the first test, not all the variants needed to be perfect. They just needed to get out there because ultimately getting the opens and clicks is what's going to drive the next variant. So I would love to kind of maybe hear from you. What's your biggest tip on like keeping that speed of iteration and innovation?
Absolutely. Even broadly. So, as we work together too, it's like, let's just get something out and see the results and then make the next bets rather than trying to take something that's huge, let's say a complex email that's going to take, weeks of QAing. So, more tactically, that makes sense. But even in the larger ecosystem of AI, where everything's changing every day, I don't think, especially this year and probably the next year, there's any point in like taking up projects that are 6 months long because you wouldn't know like what things would look like in the next 2 weeks. And so if you can get fast wins and then learn from it and know now what is the next AI bet to take, I think that's the way to go for the next few months.
I think that's also why we onboarded Just Words because the integration was very quick. And if there's a new AI tool in 6, 8 months from now, and we just waited um, or integrated another tool for all those 8 months, it might be no longer relevant. So getting the campaigns, the tests out there to the individual customers has been really interesting because we've been able to like learn, 1% improvements every single time. And those 1% will add up in 6 to 8 months instead of just waiting for that
All right.
eighth month.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Awesome. Well, lots of interesting insights. I learned how, we went very dynamic from Excel sheets and static emails. I love how you're expanding your capacity in not just doing your day-to-day marketing, but maybe becoming a little bit of a data scientist and an engineer and more. And yeah, all your hot takes on, where AI is going. So really appreciate your time on that.
I think we agree on a lot of it except for New York and San
Yeah.
Francisco. It feels like you're leaning towards San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a contentious one. We'll agree to disagree there. That's amazing. Thank you for spending time with me today. And if you enjoyed this conversation, share it with somebody who's ready to get very practical about AI in marketing. I'm Neha, and we'll see you next time with more real stories, real results, and no fluff.